So I'm really interested in first starting to just talk about the research process a little bit, which maybe is a kind of stuffy way to start thinking about this work when it has so much life and energy. But you've been thinking about this for a long time. And I'm wondering if you could just talk about like the development period and why that it was important. I mean, we sat here in a blizzard in December 2016 and saw some early versions of these things, and you guys had already been working. But could you just talk about conversations and when you started to think about it?
So Ehud and I worked together for the first time in 2016 on a piece called Riff This, Riff That, which was a commission by the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council at the River to River Festival. And it went surprisingly well, because, things with siblings can go really well or not so well. And we were really happy with it. So we decided to work together again. And Ehud told me about Nazareth. I had heard, I always go to Ehud's gigs, and I would always hear this one composer, and I was like, what? It's that like samba vibe. I really like it. Who's that composer? And he had mentioned it to me in passing many times. And then when we decided to collaborate again, he said, we have to do Nazareth.
Often Nazareth gets compared to Scott Joplin because it's similar binary musical forms and influences mixing European and African elements. So then when I discovered that, I was like, wow, this is great. I mean, it's because just to a pianist, there's such a Chopin-esque quality to his work that it's really appealing. And
so I read this thing about a research project that you sometimes do with music, or maybe you used to do in training, that you would listen and transcribe scores. And I wonder if you did this for any of this music as a way of kind of unpacking the structure of...
So this actually, Nazareth, he actually wrote all his music. It's like piano music, like classical piano music. So what you heard tonight, some of it is actually played note for note how he wrote it. Like the last piece, the finale, Batuka. That's exactly what he did. There's nothing added.
So I was thinking about the sort of the melody of the piano, but also piano as percussion instrument. And if this is making you feel it more, because the percussion, you really are pulling it out.
Yeah, well, that's a good observation. The thing is, so Nazareth, in a way, his piano pieces are so great because he kind of orchestrates the percussion in the piano already. Like if you play the pieces alone, which there's parts of them where they're playing, the rhythmic figures and the percussions and the rhythms are already there. So, for example, I actually have a recital program of just Nazareth pieces, and that's how great he stands as a composer, is that he stands alone like that. And it's like, like a great classical composer might write very orchestrally, for the piano, or he might be writing a string quartet for the piano. And Nazareth is definitely writing percussion. He's writing those rhythmical instruments into the piano.
Ephrat, could you say something about, so the dancers come from different backgrounds, and you let those different forms come together. How did you trust that they would coalesce into something? So you've got this composer who we wouldn't expect to see with this kind of movement vocabulary, and then we've got distinctly different but related forms.
The composer himself and his music actually, to me, feel very much representative of everything we're doing because, he was composing like the first trio, 1893, right? And the next one was 1910, I believe, or 1918. So it's this composer, at the turn of the century who is already having this like hybrid vision of music. And he's mixing, like traditional or folkloric Afro-Brazilian rhythms with romantic classical music from Europe. So already from the starting point, we're talking about some kind of hybrid notion of creativity or creation. So in that way, it perfectly sits with me.
And also, if I may interject, is that Nazareth had a very hard time because classical musicians at the time, because there was other classical composers, and of course, Villa-Lobos, who was influenced by Nazareth actually. And then there was others that, he wasn't entirely in the classical camp, yet he wasn't entirely in the popular camp. So it's this person kind of in between two worlds that's a little lost. And, that, I think, is reflected in the, in the dance, and it comes out.
Right, because there's this whole, a lot of people say, oh, you're taking street dance or social dance to the stage. And I feel that that's not really accurate. Like, this is its own thing that is not the club, it's not a battle, it's not a street jam, it'll never replace those things, and those things are perfect. When we bring all these things together here, it's something different, and that merits some kind of exploration. And it's interesting to me because although it's, maybe it's new in a way, and it's not the club, which is, again, where we are all kind of connected as dancers, it has, and this is sort of what you were asking, it has these values of the club. And when I say the club, I'm specifically referring to the New York underground house dance community, right? Where, gender is super fluid, like nobody really cares where you're from or what you do. You dance with people for 10 years, you don't even know each other's names, but it's like total love on the dance floor. It's sort of a utopic vision of the world and of life and of tolerance and equanimity. And I feel like those are the things that are important to me in my work, exploring those ideas. And so with bringing so many singular artists together, I feel like that is like sort of such a rich field of material and resources to explore all those things.
Well, I was thinking about that because you and I have talked about this sort of what do you care to bring from the club onto the concert stage? But then I also got thinking about a jazz club and that kind of really other kind of vibe where there's room for improvisation and are some of those values that you think of in some club in Greenwich Village that you went to or you play at currently that you think like some of that is here, or does this feel completely different?
Well, I would say some of that is here in certain parts of some of the pieces are more open, that there's improvisation, but it's different because when you're just dealing with that world of music, and here there's theater, there's dance, there's lighting, so it is completely different. I would say it's kind of it has the potential to be as other artistic experience.
I can see it in the voguing section in particular that you guys are as delighted watching voguing as we are.
To play off the dancers is really inspiring, and the whole rhythmic thing. I just want to also mention that, like, a lot of the clapping and the stomping that they're doing, it really comes from these rhythmic cells that came from the pieces. And actually just, Sergio Krakowski, the pandero player, he really did an incredible job of working with Ephrat and the dancers and, kind of composing these rhythmic structures that, they come from the rhythms of the piece, but then they morph into this other thing. And
it's really choreographed, a lot of it, but there are so Omari, every night with those gloves, going off freestyle. Like different entrances, like quick 4/8 counts freestyle. The whole thing with Linda and Sergio, the pandero player at the end, freestyle, because it's like about their connection more than anything, right? So of course the trajectory is set, the structure is in place, but the thing about this amazing group of artists is like I trust them implicitly, so I know that when there is a moment of improvisation, it's gonna be gorgeous, right? Like, and I think that's sort of the club values that have to come up here. Like, how do we balance that? Because there's so much beauty and like sort of honesty in those moments. And as a choreographer, I think in creating work like choreography, I put myself to the task of how do I have that freestyle feeling even when every iota of movement is set. I think like any form that starts out as a freestyle or improvised form, at the essence it is freestyle, right? But especially for example, hip-hop, breaking hip-hop and house, those are now all global forms, right? Like it's like a global culture of dance now. Mm-hmm. So of course the root is what it is in African American vernacular dance, but as people have wanted to learn about it and be part of this all over the world, the pioneers, our mentors, have figured out a way to codify it and create a foundation that ideally is sort of your template or the way that you can access freedom in your movement. So that is really important, that although there is, there are foundational steps. I can teach a breaking class and I can teach you the names of the steps and we can do a little phrase, all of that. But those steps or those movements are supposed to harness within you ability to be free and to express yourself.
So I want to just ask also about the choice that it feels like it's a similar choice, moments of stillness and moments of silence. And if you could talk about how, because you're giving us so much, but then it cools out for a second, and when you realized that you could have, that the absence might mean something also.
Yeah, so thanks to the pillow, I was able to develop chunk of material here first in our first Pillow Lab residency, and like 20 minutes of material, and then the second 20 minutes more. So I had 40 minutes of material with no silence. It was just music and dance, and I was like, this is too dense. I can't deal with it. Like, I made this, and I can't even deal with it. And I realized in order, you know, it's like with movement. If things go too fast for too long, it becomes invisible. You can't, there's no shift. Like, you're not going to even be able to appreciate the nuances there. So I knew that there needed to be space for that in a kind of choreographic and structural way, but then also in just like a human way. Like, you need a second. So I think part of our collaboration was realizing, like, okay, how much do we play and dance this music in a more traditional way? With dancing, we weren't really doing it in a traditional way, but how much are we playing like as written, and how much are we sort of going off into different arrangements? And we got there. It took a while.
Yeah, it was definitely a balance. Like, there's definitely some stuff that we're messing around with the form, you know, because there's a very traditional form to this music, which is the march form. It's like all of American ragtime and South American music, you know, is in this form, the A, B, B, A, C, C.
You guys got that?
That's the
That'll be a
form.
quiz
And so
later.
we played around with that there's certain pieces that we cut and we put different things and I have to say, at first, you know, I'm a purist because I just said, look, the guy wrote it this way for a reason.
Right. No, but and this is where Ehud very graciously started to understand that this wasn't just a Nazareth concert. We were creating
for
this
dancing,
world.
It's different.
And we had to figure out what that was.
But I actually thought,
You know?
I actually was thinking about sibling rivalry a little bit, and how that you actually could speed up or slow down and really mess with it. Oh, wait, maybe I should.
Well, I just want to
Should have been
say,
on some rehearsal.
I just want to say that it was my idea to do this show to Nazareth. Everything else is my sister.
I did not see that coming.